Fake stalkers. This happened a few years ago. Liz was home alone for the weekend while her parents attended a wedding, and she had invited a friend over, Maya. Maya, who lived just behind Liz's house, agreed to come over. Liz prepared snacks and tea, looking forward to a fun and relaxing day. About 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. However, it wasn't a normal ring. The person at the door was pressing it urgently, as if in a hurry. When she reached the door and asked,
"Who's there?"
a rushed voice responded,
"Maya."
When Liz opened the door, she saw Maya standing there, looking disheveled and breathless. She rushed inside, visibly shaking with fear. Liz quickly led her inside and handed her a glass of water, then asked what had happened. Maya explained that while walking to Liz's house, she had noticed a man staring at her, smiling. Although she tried to ignore him and keep walking, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was following her. She turned around to check if the man was still there, and he was following her. Panicked, she ran to Liz's house, hoping to lose him. But by the time she arrived, the man had vanished. Liz reassured her friend that she was safe inside. They carried on with their plans for the day, but Maya remained uneasy, unable to shake off the fear from her encounter. After a while, both girls got hungry and decided to order a pizza. About half an hour later, the doorbell rang. Liz assumed it was the pizza delivery, so she got up to answer it. Liz walked toward the door.
"Who is it?"
She called, gripping the doorknob.
"Pizza delivery, ma'am."
Just as she was about to turn the knob, a piercing scream from upstairs shattered the silence. Maya suddenly screamed from upstairs.
"Liz, don't open the door."
Her voice filled with panic. Maya rushed down the stairs, yanking Liz away from the door with terrifying force. Liz barely had time to process what was happening before she was pulled back. Startled and confused, she demanded to know what was going on. With fear in her eyes, Maya began explaining everything. She said she had looked out the window and saw the same man who had followed her earlier. Now, he was standing at the door, waiting for them to open it. She believed he had been stalking them and was impersonating the pizza delivery man. Liz hesitated, wondering if Maya was overreacting. Maybe she was just paranoid after all. It was nearly impossible to see his face clearly in the darkness. Maya gripped her wrist tightly, her face pale as she saw Liz stepping toward the door.
"Liz, don't. I saw him. It's him. It's the same man."
She took a step toward the door. The man spoke.
"I saw you run. Don't leave. Open the door and take your pizza."
Liz froze. The man's words sent a chill down her spine. Suddenly, she remembered. Earlier that night, while watching Netflix, she had seen something move outside before they even ordered food. A shadow, a flicker, just for a second. But she had ignored it. Maybe it had been him. Snapping back to reality, Liz realized the door was now shaking violently. Maya dragged Liz upstairs into a bedroom and locked the door. The two girls huddled together, listening in terror. The man started pounding on the door, screaming for them to open it. The banging and his increasingly deranged voice sent chills through them. Overwhelmed with fear, Liz immediately called the police. All they could do was sit there, crying and praying for help. After what felt like forever, they heard police sirens. Finally, the man was caught. Liz and Maya were escorted out safely. The police informed them that they had found the body of a murdered pizza delivery driver. His uniform jacket had been stolen, used as a disguise. They had no idea what his true intentions were, but they were lucky. If Maya hadn't recognized him in time, they both might have been his next unfortunate victims. The strange man in the vacant lot. Lucas and his fiancée, Emily, decided to spend a weekend getaway at Lucas's family cabin deep in the woods. They enjoyed outdoor activities like hiking, fishing, and four-wheeling, making the most of the peaceful atmosphere the cabin provided. On the last day, Emily and Lucas's family decided to leave early, while the couple chose to stay behind for some quiet time before heading home that evening. As the sun set, Lucas and Emily packed their belongings into the truck and began driving down the dirt road leading out of the property. The road was surrounded by dense forest, and they had to pass through 5 gates along the way, each secured with a lock that Lucas had to unlock and relock as they passed. When they reached the 4th gate, something felt different. It was located in a large clearing, allowing the landscape to be clearly visible under the moonlight. Still, something about it unsettled him, as if an unseen threat lurked nearby. He unlocked the gate and drove through, but as he turned back to lock it again, he noticed a strange light in the distance. A flashlight beam flickered through the trees, and the silhouette of a man appeared. Lucas hesitated, watching the figure for a moment, but dismissed it, assuming it was just another property owner. However, just as Lucas began locking the gate, he heard a voice calling for help. Squinting into the darkness, he called out,
"Hey, are you okay?"
and slowly stepped toward the flashlight. At that moment, the flashlight jerked wildly in all directions. Lucas could see the figure sprinting toward them, but the man wasn't shouting, he was just running. The man was dressed in dark clothing and carried a backpack. Panic surged through Lucas, and he rushed back to the truck. He jumped in and sped off, trying to stay calm, telling Emily that he had just been startled. He drove about a quarter of a mile before reaching the final gate. Putting the truck in park, he hesitated for a moment, glancing back toward where he had seen the man. Seeing nothing, he stepped out and walked toward the gate. Then, in the distance, a flickering light appeared again. It was him. The man was coming. He appeared once again, sprinting toward them. Summoning his courage, Lucas shouted,
"Do you need help?"
hoping the man would stop and respond. But nothing changed. But this time, he didn't run toward Lucas like before. Instead, he charged straight at the truck where Emily was sitting. She was in danger. Emily, now seeing the man in the rearview mirror, asked Lucas to check if he needed help. Lucas called back, revealing his earlier encounter, and they both realized the man was likely chasing them. This was a serious threat.
Lucas, we have to go.
Emily screamed. Emily shrieked as the man sprinted toward the truck, grabbing the door handle and yanking it violently, trying to force it open. Lucas acted on instinct. He rushed to the back of the truck, yanked open the toolbox, and grabbed a tire iron. He swung the metal bar down onto the man's wrist with a sickening crack. The man let out a pained scream. He stumbled backward, his arm hanging limply at his side. But instead of running, he just smiled, a twisted, unsettling grin. And then, he stepped forward again. Lucas jumped back into the truck, slammed the door shut, and floored the gas. The truck shot forward, kicking up dirt as they sped through the final gate. Emily twisted in her seat, looking out the back window in terror. "What the hell just happened?" she asked. But Lucas had no answer. He had no idea what or who that man was. Lucas glanced at the rearview mirror. The man stood in the middle of the road, not running, not moving, just smiling. When they reached the main highway, Lucas called his father and told him what had happened. His father had never seen anyone act like that in the area before. The next day, an uncle visited the cabin, but found no trace of the strange man. And to this day, they have never discovered his identity or his motive why he did what he did. Horrible night train ride. From behind, I felt an icy hand gripping tightly on my shoulder. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as the cold fingers tightened. Slowly, I turned my head, but there was no one there. I staggered back out of the compartment, my body shaking as I looked around frantically. The train was still there, silent and motionless on the tracks. I don't know where I am. The only light comes from the flickering light of the train window. I started walking along the length of the train, hoping to find some clue about where we had stopped. My footsteps crunched heavily on the gravel. Then, I heard a faint rustling noise behind me. Instinct told me to run, but I didn't know where to go. My only option was to go back inside. I couldn't stay out here, but the thought of stepping back into that strange train filled me with fear. Still, I had no other choice. Stepping inside, the air felt heavier, more stifling than before. The dim lights flickered weakly, casting shadows over the empty seats. In the distance, near the end of the train car, there was a figure sitting motionless, head bowed, just like the girl Jan I had met. I knew I shouldn't approach, but my legs moved on their own, carrying me toward her. I called out, my voice trembling, "Jan?" I stopped a few feet away, staring at the figure. Her hair hung limply over her face, wet and dripping, as if she had just emerged from a pool of water. I stepped closer, intending to touch her, calling Jan again. She didn't respond. Then, she finally moved. She slowly turned her head toward me, her movements unnaturally stiff, jerking like a robot. My breath caught in my throat as her face came into view. Her eyes, once dark and intense, were now completely empty, like black voids staring right through me. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her lips curled into that same strange smile as before. There was a faint hissing sound, perhaps coming from her. Before I could react, she stood up, her body rising off the ground, floating. Her feet no longer touched the floor. She hovered just above it, her long hair flowing in the air. I was frozen in place, horrified as Jan's form began to change, her body stretching and distorting. It was something I had never seen in real life. A voice echoed through the train car, coming from everywhere, surrounding me.
Why did you come back? Why are you here?
My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. This couldn't be real. I needed to get out and leave. But when I turned to run, I felt something cold and invisible pressing against my chest. I moved like a puppet, being forced back into the seat. The lights flickered violently, casting wild, shaking shadows as if the train had come alive. Suddenly, the whispering stopped. Silence filled the air. I looked up, and there was Jan, floating, her long, translucent fingers reaching toward my face. She told me to come with her, that I could never leave. The cold radiated from her, seeping into my bones, freezing me. Her fingers brushed against my skin, and in that moment, I was no longer on the train. I was floating in an empty void, with nothing but the sound of my own panicked breathing. I tried to move, but I couldn't. My body wouldn't respond. I was trapped. Then, from the darkness, I saw them other figures, floating, drifting. Their forms were distorted, their faces obscured, and their eyes were empty. I couldn't breathe. Was this what happened to the missing passengers? Had they been brought here, into this void, to become part of this nightmare? And was I next? Suddenly, with a violent jerk, I was thrown back into reality. I was in my seat again, gasping for breath, drenched in cold sweat. Jan was gone. The train began to slow down, the familiar sound of the tracks returning. Finally, the train stopped at the station. The doors slid open, revealing an empty platform bathed in dim, flickering light. I staggered off the train, my legs weak and unsteady after what had happened. The doors closed, and as I turned back to look, the train began to move again, disappearing into the darkness. I didn't know if it was truly over. I stood there for a long time, staring into the void where the train had vanished. The morning sunlight shone through the dusty window as I entered the apartment management office, my nerves still on edge from the strange events of the past few days. I needed answers, anything to explain the bizarre encounters in the elevator. I entered the management office and told him about the strange things I had seen. I mentioned seeing some strange people using the elevator from the 6th floor. They looked like a homeless couple, barefoot and dirty. They always held their stomachs, as if they were in pain. The man frowned and pulled out a list of tenants. He glanced over it and then looked back at me, shaking his head. He said no such couple existed. No one matching my description lived on the 6th floor. I stood there, stunned. If no one lived there, then who were the people I had seen? Still uneasy, I headed to the mailroom, hoping that doing something simple like picking up my mail would calm my nerves. When I opened the mailbox, something caught my eye. It was the maintenance bill for the 6th floor. 2 rooms were listed, 601 and 602, along with a water bill. One strange thing I noticed was that the water bill for room 602 was unusually high. I blinked, staring at the numbers. It didn't make sense. How could someone use that much water? Something was really off. A few nights later, I returned to my apartment after a late night at work. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was happening on the 6th floor. As the elevator doors slid open, I froze. Inside the elevator stood a large man, holding a long, heavy golf bag. There was a strange odor, a faint metallic smell wafting through the air. I glanced at the elevator control panel. The button for the 6th floor was lit. When the doors opened on the 6th floor, he stepped out, carrying the bag down the dark hallway toward room 602. I waited until he disappeared before stepping out of the elevator, my heart pounding. I glanced down and saw tiny drops of something dark on the floor that looked like blood. I had no idea what he was carrying in that bag. Back in my apartment, I couldn't sit still. My mind raced, piecing together the strange encounters. The barefoot couple, the blood, the water bill. Something horrific was happening in room 602. After pacing for what felt like hours, I finally picked up the phone and called the police. The flashing red and blue lights of the police cars illuminated the street outside my building. I watched from the window as the officers entered, heading straight to the 6th floor. My heart pounded in my chest as I waited, wondering what they would find. Minutes passed, and I could only pace back and forth in my apartment, too anxious to sit down. Finally, I saw the police return. Their faces were grim, and one of them motioned for me to come down. I rushed down the stairs to meet them. I asked what they had found. They told me that inside room 602, they found a makeshift surgery room. There was blood everywhere. They also found a freezer and suspicious golf bags. Inside them were dismembered bodies. Their organs had been removed. I felt nauseous. Organ trafficking, right in my building. I could hardly comprehend it. I also asked them about the barefoot couple I had seen in the elevator, and they said there was no one else there that matched my description. Determined to understand what had happened, I asked to see the elevator security footage. As the video played, my heart raced. I saw myself in the elevator, but I was alone, talking to no one. I felt numb. 3 days later, I received the final report from the police. The autopsy had been completed. The victims found in room 602 were all homeless. The people I saw in the elevator were likely the spirits of the 6th floor. They had been tragically taken by criminals and were still searching for something, perhaps a part of themselves. Killer in the Rain. It's been half a year since that night. The memory of that encounter still haunts me. I thought time would ease the anxiety, that the man would fade from my mind just like he disappeared in the rain. But as the months passed, the fear grew more intense. What if he came back? Tonight, as the sun set, the rain returned, pouring heavily, just like that day. I was sitting in my usual spot on the sofa, watching TV despite my efforts. My attention wasn't on the screen. I kept glancing at the window all evening, unable to shake the feeling that someone was out there, watching me. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. The sound cut through the rain, and my heart skipped a beat. Could it be happening again? I cautiously opened the door, but this time I was prepared. My hand resting on the pistol I had placed in the nearby drawer, ready for a moment like this. The porch was empty, except for the relentless sound of rain hitting the ground. But just as I was about to close the door, I noticed something. Footprints. Someone had been here, fresh and muddy, still sticking to the porch. I went back inside and locked the door. I grabbed my phone and called the police, explaining that I thought it was the same man who had tried to harm me years ago, and he was back. They said they'd send someone, but I had no idea how long it would take. For now, I was on my own. The rain continued, growing heavier by the minute, the wind picking up as well. I paced the living room, glancing out the window every so often. That's when I saw a flash of light deep in the woods. I realized I couldn't wait for the police to arrive. I had to confront him before he made his move. Panic welled up inside me, but this time, I reminded myself not to lose my composure. I grabbed a flashlight and my pistol, threw on a jacket, and headed out the back door. The rain drenched me the moment I stepped outside. I followed the flickering light deep into the woods. My flashlight cut slowly through the night as the muddy ground made every step feel heavy, not just from the mud, but from my hesitation to venture further. I continued on. As I ventured deeper, my steps became slower and more cautious. Then I crouched behind a tree to get a better look. It was him, unmistakable with the scar on his face. He was there, standing by the fire, his back to me. And in his hand was something different this time, not a rifle, but an axe. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The rain sizzled on the fire. I didn't know what he was doing, pacing back and forth, muttering to himself as if planning something. Suddenly, he stopped and turned toward my house. My house. He started walking, a strange smile spreading across his face. At first, he walked slowly, but then his pace quickened, the axe swinging in his hand as if he were preparing for a bloody hunt. He approached the house. I didn't have time to think he only had an axe after all. I pulled out my pistol and stepped out from behind the tree, shouting for him to stop, but he didn't stop. He kept walking, eyes fixed on my house, as if I weren't even there. I fired a warning shot into the air. The sharp sound cut through the rain and thunder. He stopped. For a moment, everything was still, as if the world itself held its breath. Then he turned to face me, cold, empty eyes and that twisted, horrifying smile. He raised the axe above his head. Before I could react, he charged. I fired twice. One shot missed, but the other hit his leg. He staggered, like a zombie, but still got up, the axe still raised. I shot again, this time hitting him in the shoulder. He dropped the axe, collapsing to the ground with a pained scream, unable to bear it anymore. Rain poured down on both of us, the fire flickering wildly in the wind. I stood over him, the gun still aimed, my hands trembling, uncontrollably. Finally, I heard the sound of sirens in the distance. The police were coming. They surrounded the man, disarmed him, and pulled him to his feet. He glared at me as they dragged him away, his eyes filled with hatred. I returned to my house, locking the door behind me, and collapsed onto the sofa. The rain continued outside, but it no longer felt suffocating. For the first time in a long while, I finally felt truly safe. The secret buried in the basement. This is a true story, something that happened to me when I was a child, but to this day, I'm still haunted when I think about it. I lived in a suburban neighborhood back then, right next to a childhood friend named Ben and his little sister Maggie. We would always play together, especially in their front yard. Even then, I could tell something wasn't right. Ben and Maggie always looked skinny and malnourished, and their clothes were always old and tattered. Their house, too, was a sight that scared me. The lawn was overgrown, windows cracked, and the walls eaten away by termites. I always assumed it was because their mother had passed away years ago, and the house hadn't been cared for since. Speaking of their father, I was always terrified of seeing him. He was muscular, with horrible burn scars. It wasn't just his appearance. His voice was always angry, and he constantly yelled at them. One time, when we were playing in the front yard, he came home unexpectedly and scolded Ben for letting me onto their property. He grabbed me by the collar and threatened to give me a beating if he ever saw me near their house again. I panicked and cried the whole way home after that incident. After a while, I completely stopped seeing Maggie. She just disappeared. I feared that something terrible had happened to her. I overheard my parents talking about Ben's father. He was a veteran who had been dishonorably discharged after massacring a village full of innocent civilians. Another strange thing was that the body of his wife, Ben's mother, was never found. There were rumors that he had killed her too. Ben and I continued to play together, even though my parents warned me not to. One of his favorite games was hide and seek. Ben was a master at it. One day, while we were playing hide and seek in the yard, Ben suggested something crazy, playing hide and seek inside his house. I was hesitant, but honestly, a part of me had always been curious about what the inside of their house looked like. So, I agreed and went in. As I had expected, the place was a mess. Broken light bulbs, empty beer cans in every corner, and food stains on the walls. It looked more like a refuge camp than a house. Then I noticed something suspicious. The basement door was locked and chained shut. Ben told me I could hide anywhere, including the upstairs bedrooms, but I was never allowed to go into the basement, under any circumstances. I found the perfect hiding spot, an old, large wooden wardrobe. I slipped inside and shut the door. As I leaned back against the wall, it shifted. Losing my balance, I fell right through the cracked wall and tumbled into a dark place, what seemed like the basement. I stood up and tried to find my way out. The fear was overwhelming, and I couldn't stay calm. The stuffed animals mounted on the walls seemed to be staring at me. Then I heard crying coming from a chained door in the basement. I slowly moved closer and peeked through the crack in the door. I was shocked to see Maggie chained to a furnace. She had wounds all over her body and looked like she hadn't eaten in days. Before I could react, I heard the basement door open. Ben's father had returned and was coming down the stairs. I quickly hid behind a large shield. He spotted my footprints and immediately knew someone else was in the basement. He searched for me, coming within inches of my hiding spot before Ben came down the stairs, distracting him. He grabbed Ben by the collar and shouted angrily. I seized the opportunity to sneak out, but not before exchanging a quick look with Ben. As soon as I got home, I told my parents everything that had happened. Within hours, Ben's father was arrested. It turned out he had been punishing them by locking them in the basement without food or water for days. He was suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and had taken his rage out on his children. Afterward, Ben and Maggie were sent to live with their aunt in North Carolina. I never saw or heard from them again. Nightmare House on the Hillside. A new beginning. Lucy, a 7-year-old girl, moved with her family to an old suburban house. It was a historic home built in the mid-1800s. The house was 2 stories tall with a basement below. Down there was a locked door leading to water tanks used to heat the house. Only her mother and the landlord had the key. They warned her never to go near it. Lucy never understood why her room was always colder than the others, even though it was right above the basement. At night, she often heard strange creaking sounds, as if someone were walking on the floor, whispers, and distant footsteps pacing in the living room. The house was old and worn. She also